Hi, John from York Bay Financial Partners, looking at the investment markets. So far, second quarter earnings season in the US has gone pretty well. On the whole, companies are reporting better than anticipated results. A couple of the big banks, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, and JP Morgan, certainly beating on their estimates. But quite interesting, the Magnificent Seven, as they're called: Microsoft, Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, Nvidia, and Tesla. Their market cap now is just over $11 trillion. They account for about 30% of the S&P, and really has some pretty stellar performance over the last sort of 6 to 9 months. Now, certainly rates have backed off a little bit in the US as well. 2-year back to 477. 10-year back at 379, and that's really on the back of those sort of better than anticipated inflation numbers last week, which still showed a continued downward path. So what does that do to the Fed thinking now? It could be very interesting in the next Fed meeting. Because still plenty of talk about recession, but you still got a pretty tight labour market out there as well. So, really the Fed sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place at present. When you add to that as well, Putin pulling out of the Black Sea sort of grain agreement, refusing to give sort of safe passage now to those ships coming out of those Ukrainian ports, exporting Ukrainian grain. So potentially that has some pretty major implications out there for the global food chain, sort of pushing up wheat prices. But really just another sort of example of sort of Russia and Putin just trying to bully his way around and, not really caring for anything else. Also as well, potentially ex-President Trump could be charged with further charges, which really could potentially sort of impact his sort of run for the 2024 presidential election. Although in the polls among the Republicans, he is still the leader. Now in the US as well, still sort of experiencing some pretty extreme weather conditions. Certain areas having extreme heat waves. Phoenix touched 116 degrees. In other areas around sort of New York, you've got sort of peak flooding. Oil still remaining relatively high, around $75 and change per barrel. In the UK, the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey appears to have got it right, sort of predicting there would be a pretty big fall in UK inflation. Latest number came in at 7.9. Now, while that's still relatively high, it's well off the sort of recent high of 8.7% the previous month. And obviously well down from that double-digit inflation that was running sort of 2 or 3 months ago. Now, obviously, the big question is now, will that continue to fall? Because certainly it's had a pretty major impact on the UK borrowing costs. They've fallen dramatically on the back of this inflation number. Weather in Europe's pretty hot as well, and certainly they were looking for pretty reasonable summer months, but the temperatures out there are really getting pretty horrendous. Certain sort of tourist sort of areas are having to be closed down because of the extreme heat. in Greece and parts of Spain, you've got extreme sort of wildfires as well. Obviously, that could have a pretty major impact on the European economy. Now, in Australia, the recent minutes from the Reserve Bank just showed what a very tight call it was to leave interest rates on pause. But again, with inflation appear to be sort of falling out there, a lot of people are now sort of saying, have we actually seen a peak in Australian interest rates? Because certainly the Australian economy is still pushing along at a pretty reasonable rate. The other big news to come out of Australia is the cancellation of the Commonwealth Games for 2026 in the state of Victoria. Now that's on the back of sort of cost overshoots. Potentially that budget has gone from sort of 2 billion to over 6 billion. Now here in New Zealand, the latest CPI figures for the June quarter, they were certainly down, but still relatively high at 6% year on year. So the figure came in at 1.1 for the June quarter. Now, the Reserve Bank has already said that interest rates are where they need to be. They're on pause and don't need to go any higher. But it's just going to be very interesting to see if that inflation does remain pretty stubborn around that sort of 6%, whether there is a further interest rate hike needed. Now, certainly the New Zealand economy will be hoping for a bit of a boost now from the Women's FIFA World Cup that starts today. Now, less than 3 months now before the election, it's really starting to get down to the wire, really. Government appears to be sort of scrambling, coming out with sort of policy after policy, but at present, still having little impact in the polls. Latest poll put National and ACT able to govern. Now, it will be very interesting to see how the next round of earnings reports come out. They should start next month. Interesting as well, house prices appear to be sort of bottoming it out, and in certain areas again seem to be sort of actually increasing in price, which is sort of quite amazing given the huge rise in interest rates over the last sort of 18 months. But again, really being driven by sort of net migrations, that figure is running around sort of 70,000 a year on the current data. Now, if you are looking for income options, go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.